It's just not right how existing businesses run today, where profits are oftentimes more important and valuable than people. What if instead of ignoring and turning a blind eye to a dog eat dog corporate culture, we instead talked about solutions and a different business model? This morning, I am joined by Shirley Chock. Shirley graduated with her bachelor's in economics from the University of Chicago and enjoyed a 20-year career in finance and administration. During this time, she also began training under Grandmaster Aiping Cheng, and in 2006 became the U.S. Women's Tai Chi National Champion. Over the course of her career, Shirley realized her Tai Chi training was instrumental in helping her manage workplace stress, conflicts, as well as associates. In 2012, she was named Working Mother Magazine's Working Mother of the Year for Yale University. In 2017, Shirley became the owner of Aiping Tai Chi Center, Southern Connecticut's largest Tai Chi school, established in 1996 by her mentor. She is speaking today in the capacity of one who trains women around stress and conflict management. She is a certified corporate wellness specialist. What I hope the listeners or viewers today will learn are remedies to increase the health of the corporation or the corporate culture, as well as its employees, shareholders, and all related parties. Welcome, Shirley.
Thank you so much, Angelina. So happy to be here in your program.
Thank you so much for joining. I very much appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to the expertise that you'll bring. We've chatted over the past year over the telephone and Zoom. And is there anything that I may have missed in your background that you would like to add?
I think that maybe I should just mention my perspective is quite unique because it comes from the Tai Chi training that I've had and how that um, reflects my view and my experiences in the corporate world. So it may be a little bit different than what other women may have in their own experiences. So it brings a different perspective, which may not be so well known. So I'm really happy to share that. And these are all from my own personal experiences, what I have experienced and seen around me as I navigated the corporate world.
As a woman.
As a woman,
Yes.
before I started my Tai Chi training and after, and the differences that I have experienced in my own navigation of
This
change and conflict and advancing in my career.
So the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you is not only because we have talked about difficult topics in the past year, but also because I think it's important for women, but not just women, but I will say specifically women, to know how to survive and thrive, but also to bring up some of this, and it might be uncomfortable for some viewers or listeners because it's not readily talked about. And if someone is blindsided, it can impact their legacy. So as this is a legacy series, I'm titling this something along the gray areas of legacy, or how to navigate or resolve the gray areas. So how might you describe the gray areas? And there will be some show notes with a couple of news articles regarding some challenges that women have faced in the corporate world, no matter their level within that corporate structure, whether they're at the top management or their entry level. So how might you define the gray areas?
Yeah, I like to find the gray areas as the uncharted paths that the other women have not charted for the women behind them. So we have women in corporate life is not a new thing. There are many women who have succeeded wonderfully in the corporate world, but on very particular paths. So if you follow those paths that have already been charted, are well worn, then there are no gray areas because it's very clearly defined how to succeed.
So they're
It's
not the
when,
pioneer.
right,
They're
right.
not at the front. getting the
If
flag.
you want to go and succeed on a different path, that's where the gray areas are. And just like it, so you'll notice that I'll use a lot of references to nature, because the practice is a practice that is very deeply rooted in nature that I do.
The type
And
that,
so
yes,
the Tai Chi practice. And
yes.
so a lot of my references will be in reference to nature. So, and when I think about going off the well-worn path when you're out in nature, you will get bloodied, scratched. You're the first to go through a wilderness. And for me, that's the gray area. So eventually a path will be worn if enough people, you may be the first, but you
Mhm.
won't be the last. And there will be others who will follow that path that you made. But whenever you are the first, you're going to get bloodied and scratched as you make that path.
Forward, absolutely. And I just want to make a reference to a moment that a part of being that first, or one of the first, or a pioneer within the corporate arena, can be changing people's beliefs, whether it's beliefs that they realize or ingrained beliefs that might be so subconscious or unconscious that they don't even realize that they might have a bias against a woman in a leadership position, or they might want to box her in. And so generally I'm speaking, this is kind of a woman's conversation today, but so yeah, that's what I think, that when somebody has to change somebody else's belief system, that can be like digging a new 6-foot trench through the Arctic regarding what
Mm-hmm.
that woman might have to go through, because other people can say, well, that's not the norm, and that can make them
Right.
very uncomfortable. Okay, so I'm just going to mention that the two articles there within the public corporate culture world, but we're going to get to private family businesses later on. So the two articles in the show notes are about women who are unfairly terminated. And not only were they blindsided by the termination, but it was also the lack of support that followed by others, whether the others were bystanders that wanted to go along to get along, or they just didn't want to get their hands dirty, because why have the hassle of, trying to stand up for somebody else's battle. So one of the articles is about a young lady by the name of Amanda Lai, I think that's how I pronounce her last name, at JLL in Los Angeles, who sued for wrongful termination, sexual harassment, retaliation for complaining about illegal conduct, and breach of contract. And the second article involves a seasoned professional named Karen Ward, who was a senior manager at Ernst & Young. She spoke up about sexual harassment and was caught in a web of retaliation, only to lose her lawsuit later on. So are these single cases? No, they're not. And so I think a lot of times when somebody is defining, developing, and executing their legacy, it might be an easy path, but there could also be challenges regarding what we don't expect, because there is envy in this world. There is bias. There is prejudice. There is the what words might you give it, Shirley, before we move on to the next question?
I think for these cases, it is not unique. It happens all the time, but it is about culture. You use the word culture, and it is about culture. And I think that it's worth talking about, what does culture mean? I think that people use this term a lot, and without really understanding the true meaning of the term culture. Culture is kind of like the habits of your environment. It's what people do because that's what everybody else does. And a culture is what people just naturally assume should happen because it's what always happens. So when you disrupt that what normally happens, then you're going up against a big tidal wave. But
A
culture
tsunami.
is, yes, yeah, right. Um, but culture is malleable, just like habits are malleable. culture is not something that you can forcibly change, just like habits aren't something that you can forcibly change with one concerted effort one time. If you want to change your own habits, it's remembering to do it every single day until it becomes the thing that you do without having to think about. And that's true for culture as well. I think a lot of people want to change culture and believe that it's something that you can do from the top down. And that
Mm,
doesn't work because
okay.
culture, it's just like habits. It's what people will just normally do without thinking. And it's actually quite malleable. So if you look at in parts around the world and what becomes part of their culture, there are some very unique things that seep into countries' cultures. How did it get there? Like Swedish meatballs. My sister lives in Denmark. Swedish meatballs, the meatballs didn't originate in Sweden, but can you think of, Swedish cuisines without meatballs? Like it has become a part of Swedish culture. And that happens in the corporate environment as well, where it has to happen where things become accepted by the people who work in that organization. It can't happen from the top down, and it can't be changed by one person trying to change the culture.
Okay.
So I think that that is where women wind up becoming very disillusioned and very discouraged when they find themselves in a corporate culture that's not used to having women around. And I think that there's a lot of pressure put on our young women, and that is pressure that they put on themselves. It's also pressure that their parents put on them and pressure that society puts on them. I think this is especially true for American women, where American young women, American girls are told their whole lives that, they are going to change the world,
Oh,
that
sure.
they're going to have these opportunities that nobody else had. And think about, so I grew up in the United States. So I have a uniquely Eastern and Western perspective. I spent part of my youth growing up in Asia, but the rest of it growing up in the United States, where I spent all of my summers over in Asia. So it's a both a Eastern
Mindset.
perspective mindset and
Yes.
also a Western mindset. The Western mindset, I was told that I can do whatever I put my mind to. Women can do everything that boys can do. Women are going to change the world. And then you go to college and you're told that you are the future leaders of this world. You can do anything.
Right.
And then you graduate from college with these expectations of everything that you are going to be able to do to change the world. And then you face reality.
Right.
And
And can I just want to interrupt for a
yeah,
second? And one of the conversations that we had before today is about how colleges can sometimes be like this is a metaphor, so I don't want anyone to get upset, a metaphor of a zoo that has safety glass, whereas the real world is like a jungle or a concrete jungle where the safety glass isn't there. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that obviously colleges are always great environments, because one of the conversations that we've also had prior to today is about two documentaries, one being The Hunting Ground. The Hunting Ground was by
mhm,
directors Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering, and also they had The Invisible War. So again, um, individuals being blindsided by hostile environments and then trying to figure out how do they rebuild so that they end up not being
mhm,
traumatized for the rest of their lives, and
yeah,
being able to reconnect with their values and build a legacy. So
mhm.
anyways, back over to you, Shirley.
Yeah, we'll definitely go over some of those things and my thoughts on those things. But I just want to kind of start off the conversation for women to realize how unfair an expectation it is that they have put on themselves before they have even faced the realities of the world. Many people, as they go through, high school, college, they still live, they haven't really faced the realities of life and haven't
somewhat
really,
sheltered.
we're somewhat sheltered, right?
Right.
Because the world really is a jungle. It really is. And American children are taught about this concept of fairness. Um, and this is very uniquely American, I feel like, because over in Asia, no one talks about things being fair or unfair. The
Right. That's
world
Hollywood. Thank you, Hollywood and
is.
John Wayne. Yes. Yeah, go ahead. John Wayne's going to show up on his horse and it's all going to be wrapped up at the end of 2 hours. Keep going.
Yeah, over in Asia, the world is what it is, and a lot of the world is unfair. And that is the reality of life. In the United States, we hold a very high degree, to this concept of things being fair,
Mm-hmm.
when we teach our children. And so when, for women especially, facing the realities of life where things really are not fair, it's a bigger hurdle for them to pass, greater disappointments where they have the expectation that they should be able to
Be
have
treated equally.
be treated equally,
Mm-hmm.
have things be fair, have people around you look out for you, that things are fair, and that you should be able to do everything you want to do.
Or,
So
or,
that.
or, sorry to interrupt you, or the world owes women um, that women ought to be protected.
Mhm. I
This
think that
illusion that
there
that other people owe me protection.
that may be the Disney effect, where
Okay.
if you grow up watching Disney, there is like chivalry in the world, and that's what you should expect.
And there are
Um,
good people. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely are.
Okay.
Absolutely are. I mean, I think that now more than ever, you have people who identify as allies. This was a word I had never heard of before when I first entered the workforce. So I graduated college in 1996. And I graduated, as you mentioned, my degree was in economics, at the University of Chicago. Not that many women, in my
Class.
economics classes. I decided to go into the financial realm. I didn't go into investment banking or consulting. I decided that I didn't want to pursue those paths. I did my summer internship in college in Goldman Sachs in Hong Kong. And that summer, I made that realization really quickly that I did not want to be a part of this really insane environment where the expectation is you just give your entire life to the
The
company.
company.
Yeah, and you have like no life of your own. I decided that just did not fit with what I wanted in my life. But I did go into the finance sector where it is still, quite male dominated. So, I did experience a lot of what many young women still experience, coming up in the corporate world. There were jobs that, there were a lot of women who they were very successful. I chose to go a different path, and I had to navigate that. So I did have to go and enter the gray areas and figure it out, and saw
Probably
that.
on your own, I would imagine, for
Mhm.
much of it. Because
Yeah.
who do you talk to? And I know that there have been times that you've been in a boardroom and it's been all men. And again, this is not to put men down, but just to realize that there are certain qualities that maybe titans of the industries have that allow them to go out there and get the business, but it might not make them particularly, what would be the words that you would use, Shirley?
Um, so my personal experience, I had no negative feelings towards any of the men around me. Um, what I felt from them was confusion and lack of understanding of how to bring me into that culture because
Okay.
I was so different. Not
Because they still
only
saw you as a woman?
woman, Asian,
Okay,
not
so
white
women
man, right?
and okay, now
Woman
we've
and
got,
Asian, right?
okay.
So just looking at me from the outset,
Mhm.
there was confusion. Um, I did not take that as an insult because I think, being Asian, a lot of my experience is um, opening up my culture so that people can start understanding it. I don't take insult that they don't get it.
Okay.
So I think that if
Or they
I,
project.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
there is a lot of I think misunderstandings that can either get resolved or can get uh, uh, conflated
Okay.
and
Escalated very quickly.
escalated.
Yes.
Right. And there is a very fine line to, when that can go one way or can go the other way. So this is the area where I probably saw the biggest difference in how my Tai Chi training um, uh, impacted my own response. And when I was younger, I would take a very defensive approach to things and take things personally and feel like it's my job to have to defend myself against insults
And
and what I
stereotypes,
perceived as
biases.
insults and biases that and my perspective to that is very, very different now because I don't perceive the insults to affect me personally because those insults come from a place of a person not understanding. And I can either make them understand or not. If they can't understand, then it's not my job to make them understand. But if it's a corporate environment, there's more than one person there, right? I I don't think it is worth letting one person define the entire culture because culture is made up by many, many people.
Of all the parties
So
there.
all the parties there, right? So I think that that's where, as women, we need to get a sense of like what is the landscape of the environment and instead of focusing on these
What we were sold and told.
personal inter
Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, right, right. It's like it's so difficult for you to have to keep trying to prove yourself over and over again, which I think a lot of women are trying to do because they're trying to prove to themselves, to everybody around them, that I can do this job. I'm good enough to do this job. I deserve the respect of the people around me. And when you don't get that in the outset, then it can be just really deflating and cause you to become defensive and then feel like I have to prove myself. I have to prove myself harder. I have to prove myself harder with each time that you don't. And I think that it's really important for women to stop trying to prove themselves because that's not going to earn you the respect. What's going to earn you the respect is for people to start accepting that you are part of the culture, that you are there and belong there because you have made yourself ingrained in that culture.
And I think one of the things you're referring to is that when a woman feels like she has to prove herself and prove herself and prove herself, she's just going to burn herself out.
She's going to burn herself out, and she is going to lose the sense of what makes the group gel, because then it just winds up being about you yourself and how you can show that you are worth it. And when you're in a group environment, it can't be about yourself anymore. It has to be about how you fit into that culture. Whether it's a culture that you want to be in or
Mm,
not, that's the other conversation about the toxic culture, because I think a lot of women feel like they can thrive in a toxic environment
they can
and they
handle it.
can't, right? And why would you want to do that to yourself? That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of women, they are trying so hard to prove their worth in that environment that they wind up actually becoming the thing that makes them um, separate and outside the group. So then they've removed themselves from the thing that they should be trying to bring themselves into the culture. That's how you get accepted.
Yeah. I just wanted to add one more thing before we move on to the next question. And I think that one of the traps can be is if I am proving myself so hard to you, now you're controlling the strings like a marionette. And if I forget what drives me, what are my core values, what's important to me, then slowly I can lose myself. And then one day I could wake up,
Yeah,
look in the mirror and say, wow, who is there? Because I haven't seen myself in 5 or 10 years or whatever the span of time is. Because if we give ourselves so much without a balance,
right.
um, then we're chasing an external gold star. And I think there is a conversation to be had about, yes, we need to do good work, but I think there's also knowing what are my own standards separate from what are somebody else's standards, and how much do I need to do to live up to somebody else's standards. Maybe a lot, maybe none at all. But if we're
Yeah,
chasing that
it's
gold star so hard, then there's also an internal landscape that's going to be affected more than the external implications. Yes.
yeah, it's so true. I mean, I think that a lot of women do wind up falling into that cycle where they lose themselves to try to chase the success that they want to chase. And then at the end of the day, after they've done all of that and they look back and reflect on their career, they wind up with some regrets because they weren't true to what makes them feel whole. And that's my advice for everyone, not just women, but everyone who is, trying to make their way in the world, especially for younger people, because
Mm,
this is something that, younger people, they just see that having success and having money is just, the highest goal that you can achieve.
right. Especially if
But
someone's empty on the inside.
mhm,
Right.
yeah, yeah, and it is at the end of the day, like when it is all over and you're looking back and reflecting, if you have completely lost your soul and you don't recognize who you are anymore,
In your
and
unique voice. Mhm.
yeah, then you will probably realize that it wasn't worth it.
That shiny gold star on the outside. Okay, thank
Mhm.
you. So for a lady employee that's had her world crushed, how might you advise her on rebuilding her life and career so she can have a chance to define, develop, and execute her legacy outside of a toxic experience? And if you'd like to speak directly to the scenario of Karen Ward or Amanda Lai, feel free to, just as a scenario for today, because again, they're not the only women that found themselves entrapped.
Yeah, I think that with that nature analogy, I think that women need to know that it is not because of them that they weren't able to thrive in a particular environment. So if you are trying to plant a rose in the deserts, you can't expect that rose to grow and thrive and bloom. It really does affect how much you thrive in the environment that you're in. So if you are in a toxic environment,
Find a more nurturing one. Keep going.
uh, then it will take so much effort to thrive. I'm not saying that it's not possible to thrive, because you do have these, you hear about these plants that do seem to bloom in environments that are so not their natural environments, and it happens, but it's rare, and it takes a lot of effort, and if you focus on being in an environment that you can thrive in, you will thrive. Right. So, these women, Amanda Lai and Karen Ward, they are highly capable women.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They were in the wrong environment, and they were put in circumstances that were not fair
And
to
blindsided
them,
them. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
blindsided them. And so that doesn't mean that you can't thrive if you have a different environment to be in. But I think the most important thing for women coming out of any kind of traumatic experience, and this is true for anyone, not just women coming out of a traumatic, toxic work culture environment, but anyone coming out of a traumatic environment, is to not keep reliving that trauma.
Yeah.
That what I do is a mindful practice. Mindfulness is this overused term that I think that people don't really like know that meaning anymore, because it's so overused. They forget the meaning. Being mindful means being present in this moment that you're in right now. And if you keep trying to apply all the things that happened in the past to this moment that you're in now, then you will not be able to thrive in this moment that you're in now, because you're not fully here.
Yeah.
You are still in that past moment, and filtering all of your experiences that you're dealing with now with what happened in the past, you're still not fully present in the moment. You're still not being mindful in this moment. And it's really, really hard to not think about all the things that happened in the past, to stay present. But that's like these mindfulness practices can train your mind to be able to live mindfully in the present.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add to that, that I think a part of it is, if an outside party sees you one way, it doesn't mean that you have to buy in and see yourself that way. So I think a part of it is letting go of believing that you're a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe
Right.
in that moment of time, and that moment of time may have been an hour, a week, a year, 10 years, whatever it is. Maybe in that moment of time you're a victim, but now if it's a year later, an hour later, a decade later, um, you don't have to carry that identity. Like if somebody works, for
Yeah.
example, I'm just making this up, at the post office, and they put on the post office uniform every day, there comes a day where you don't have to put on the post office uniform. You're no longer a postal worker or a
Mm-hmm.
nurse or a firefighter, whatever that quote uniform is. And so I think similarly in that, I think that it's being able to say, okay, maybe that person was victimized there, but I don't have to bring that persona forward. and
Yeah,
carrying on that mirroring. That's what I would call it, in
right.
the mirroring.
Yeah, it that I totally believe that 100%. I do believe that, victims of trauma need to heal before they move on. And I think a lot of trauma victims don't allow themselves that time to heal. And so they think that they are moving on when they're not. If you keep revisiting that trauma, then you haven't healed.
Mhm.
You're not actually ready to move on yet. And I think a lot of women, they feel like they need to just move forward, and
Be
it
strong.
will just be right, be strong
Yeah.
and move forward.
Stiff upper
um
lip.
and you can't fully move forward until you digest what happened,
Honestly.
process
Honestly.
honestly,
Yeah.
digest and process what happened. You have to honestly revisit and acknowledge how it hurt you, and really go, and if you need a professional help to do that, you should do that, so that you can be honest with it and then move on. And then
So
when you move on, then move on with that new perspective that this was the past.
yeah. So unpack, resolve. Okay. And before I move on to the next question, which has to do with the legacy of a company or a brand, would you provide maybe one healing tip? Just one. I just thought you might throw it out there. Maybe it'll get the creative juices going for somebody who's watching or listening.
um Healing is so hard because you have to be honest. So you use the word, honesty, and it is key. I think a lot of people are afraid to really be honest about what happened in their lives, to really look deep into themselves, to be honest with themselves. We are so good at making up um, just constructs in our mind to protect ourselves, right? And we can rationalize anything, and
Mm,
we can rationalize excuses, we can rationalize scenarios, but until you can break through all of those rationalizations and constructs that your brain has formed to protect yourself, I
yeah.
don't think you can truly heal. Like, I think that the only way to really heal, and this is not just healing, but this is growing, just
Growing
in
beyond.
life in general, just
Yeah.
just growing to meet your full potential. You have to first break down all of the barriers. And I think women put up so many more barriers than men do, because there's so many things that, and this is from my own personal experience too. It's like
Okay.
just all these barriers that you put up so that you don't wind up feeling hurt,
Mm,
so that you don't feel you are weak,
mm,
that you want to feel strong.
right.
You don't want to feel like you are the weaker sex. So all of these barriers that we put up to protect ourselves, um, those are those are barriers that prevent us from being hurt. They're also barriers that prevent us from growing, because we
Yeah.
have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with other people. We more importantly have to be honest with ourselves. So this is where my perspective is from a uniquely physical perspective,
Okay.
where, I didn't talk about like, what is it that I do? Like, why do I have this unique perspective? What is Tai Chi? So Tai Chi is a martial art that you experience in a two-person situation where you might think of Tai Chi as this slow-moving, choreographed set of exercises, and that is Tai
A part
Chi,
of it.
a part of it.
Yeah.
But as the martial art, it is two people connecting to each other, and you're trying to direct and redirect each other's force and energy and momentum. Where if you are resisting and pushing and really fighting back, and trying to use your own body's physical strength, um, that's actually the way for you to get knocked down the fastest. So it's,
Mm.
how do you stay on your feet when somebody like me, right? I am not a big muscular person. So how do I engage in this practice with somebody who is much bigger and much stronger physically than me?
Hmm.
It can't be from my physical strength. I can try to make my muscles big and strong, which I tried to do before, but there's a limit to how big my muscles can be. My maximum is still going to be so much less than the maximum of what a man can build up. So if I try to develop that kind of strength, to make myself physically stronger in a way a man will be physically stronger, I
Hmm.
will still always just be here.
Yeah.
So I can't develop that kind of strength. I have to um, acknowledge that that is not the strength that I need to develop. I need to be honest with what is my strength, and how can I navigate this scenario where I can leverage the other person's strength and use it against them.
And I just wanted to say, I think some women might know their strengths, and I think some might not, unless they've
Because
had coaching or a mentor or somebody that can look directly at them and say, here is what I see, and to offer them some feedback.
right. And I think that that is so true, where a lot of women, because, they don't know, so they will only see what they're exposed to. And there's a
Correct. In the media.
particular idea in the media,
Right.
what they're told about what is strong and what, they should be striving for to succeed. And they're all trying to and go down that path that may not follow their strengths. So if you don't have that ability to really be honest, then definitely go and get the
Some
assistance
feedback.
of other people who can be more objective to look.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be objective with yourself.
Yeah. And so if a woman can't be a brick wall, would you speak to the strength of water for a moment? And then I'm going to move on to the next question.
Yeah, so like, I don't know if you can see, I have the elements in my back. This is where I do my online programming, and the Chinese elements, you have wood, water, metal, fire, and earth. And water is the one that I connect with the most because, when you think of Tai Chi, you think of water. And the water, it is the softest substance where you can't even hold on to it, right? You go and you try to hold water and it just goes right through your hands. You can't hold on to it. But when the water all comes together in one force, I mean, the power of that will break through the brick walls. It will take down metal. Like see the power and the destruction that a tsunami can make. So it's this idea of being fluid. So when life tries to knock you down, if you are rigid and you try to resist physically,
Mhm.
if they are really, really strong and they are stronger physically than that person who is trying to push them, they can use their hardness to resist and win that fight. But if you are not physically stronger and you resist, what you do is actually you give power to the other person to push you. When you push someone, what is it that's getting pushed? You're finding something to push against. So if you resist and you're not as physically strong as the person pushing you, you
Mhm.
actually give them power. If
Because they're
you,
directing you that moment.
because they find something to push against. So
Yeah.
what if you don't give them anything to push against? They try to push you, but they can't find that point to push. They push you, and it's like pushing water, right?
Mhm.
So that is the power of Tai Chi. And I have used this in my experiences with conflict. So I think that this is probably the one thing that had made me the most, or the thing that helped me the most as I navigated my corporate career. So as I advanced in leadership positions, it's not like people didn't try to push me down.
Or
That's
test you.
the corporate world, right? Like that
Yes.
is well, just like, and I worked in higher ed, but there was a very corporate environment there as well. And people are trying to get ahead, and people have egos, and people are trying to advance their you know
Vision, agenda.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, how do you navigate around that and still be able to advance with what your vision and agenda is?
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So to sum up, maybe for employees that have been through a toxic experience, your advice to them might be um, to reconnect with their strengths and weaknesses, to know them, to be honest with themselves, to set aside time to heal, and to not absorb that experience in determining their identity.
Right, right. I think that, being honest with your strength and weaknesses and your needs in the culture, the environment. Like if you think of yourself as a plant, what is the environment that will more naturally allow that plant to flourish? If you plant yourself in that environment, then it will be easier for you to be able to succeed because the environment
Will
is your more
nourish.
natural, environment to nourish you. But that's if you want it to be easy. Some women do want to be pioneers, right?
Okay.
They are willing to um, take those scratches and be the first. And, then that's okay too. That's
Mhm.
admirable. But then you need to even more acutely understand the environment that you're in so that you can thrive, so that you're not stomped, right? So then it takes even more understanding and nuance to be able to thrive. It takes more care. And I think that like that's where a lot of women, they feel like, just willing it to happen will make
Mm.
it happen. Like
Oh.
if I want it enough,
Yeah.
then it will happen. And that is not reality. Like that, you
Is an illusion of
have
wishful thinking.
it's
Yeah.
an illusion of wishful thinking. So I think people, and that's part of the honesty, as well, is you need to know the environment that you're in and how you can actually thrive. You know, it may not be fair, it may not be right, but if that's the environment you have chosen and you have chosen to be the pioneer, then that's the environment that you're going to face, and it will be a jungle,
Yeah.
because life is a jungle.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay. So, in the legacy of a company or a brand, how can they better create their legacy in the marketplace when the top priority appears to be protecting the image of the institution? And I said appears.
Yeah, I think that this modern age that we're in is actually a very exciting time where the image of the institution is no longer completely controlled by the institution anymore. I think that an institution is always out to look for their image and reputation
Their best
first. I think
interest.
that's just the
Yeah.
nature of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um, but that image and that reputation is no longer completely controlled by them because of social media, because of just the instantaneous spread of bad information and that negative impact of a brand spreads so fast that a company has to address it.
Hmm.
It's not like they can just write the PR and then everybody will just listen to that, because people will spread the negativity about things. So that's what brands, we see that happening, where brands have to address when these toxic work environments get exposed
Yeah.
and people start, putting attention on it. And that becomes their reputation and their brand.
Okay. So they also have an opportunity to get very honest and grow.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's expected. So that's the thing, is it is now, because we have this younger generation of employees that have expectations. So I think this is going to be something that we're going to be seeing more, just what the companies are expected to do. And as we have the leadership changes at the top,
Hmm.
so right now it's slowly starting to happen.
Hmm.
And over the next, 10 years, we're going to see, a lot of that happening as the younger people who expect companies to be socially responsible. And companies have to answer to that.
Yeah. So in the scenario of Karen Ward, I found it very interesting. Why didn't the company make right by her? But again, it came down to the contract with the attorney. So if she had signed something related to arbitration, then the contract makes the law and then that's it. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And now you see more and more people going against there are so many more leaks that come out about NDAs, that, and you would think that before, NDAs and these arbitration agreements are so rock solid in favor of the companies.
Hmm.
But now more and more there are leaks that come out, and you don't have the same kind of retribution on the person leaking. So there's just I think more and more is going to get exposed, and companies need to answer to policies that negatively affect their brand.
Yeah. So an opportunity for growth. Okay. So the next
Mhm.
question, in the legacy of the investors and shareholders that sit on the board of a company or the donors to an endowment fund, how can they contribute to a company's legacy in caring, again, about more than the image of the institution in protecting profits? And the reason that I bring up donors and endowment fund is because in the documentary, The Hunting Ground, at the top are the donors and endowment funds. Then the second tier is the a sports coach of the sports teams, the
Mm-hmm.
director of collegiate athletics, and then at the very bottom is the president. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and
Yeah, and this I think, and we see this where because there are so few of these mega donors to endowments, because the concentration of wealth has, gotten, smaller and smaller. You have, actually this small group of people who are donating, so much money to all of these major institutions. And as these donors become more public figures, the expectations for what they do is also
going to be scrutinized.
greater,
Yeah,
scrutinized. Yeah,
yeah.
so there are concerted social efforts to focus on bad behavior by donors
That maybe
to
just don't
the
care
university.
or sorry.
Yeah, so things that they need to
Know about.
acknowledge in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So universities, the university students care passionately about the image of their universities and who's donating money and where that money is coming from. So my perspective is from Yale University, where I worked, and the students were so knowledgeable about who were the major donors to the university
Oh
and
wow.
where their money was coming from,
Mm-hmm.
and and the legacy of how that money came from and what they were funding, and getting a lot of media exposure, and doing concerted efforts to make these donors become responsible.
Well, it's
Um,
interesting because they've got a lot of power and they can
mhm,
direct other people, especially if they're at the top. I mean, I don't want to get any sports coaches upset with me, but I'm
mhm,
just I just find it interesting because again, that takes a certain level of emotional intelligence. It takes a certain level of having done the inner work to even care about the repercussions on someone else compared to saying, well, it didn't happen to me. I'm safe where
mhm.
I'm at. So and that was
Yeah.
one of the questions that came up is thinking, do these companies just not have the tools because they could easily retain coaches and advisors and wellness experts and so forth, or is it just that they don't care because it's easier and the titans of the industry are bringing the money in, so and it's a number off of
It's
an accounting balance sheet if
it comes back to culture, and it's just like you do what has been done because that's what you know to do.
and it's
And
worked in the
when
past.
because it worked in the past, because no one has really given you an easy way of doing something different, and nobody wants to be that first person. So how does culture change? It comes from within, because there isn't things have to get done, and you're going to do it the easiest way you can. And the easiest way is how you know how to do it, and
Mm-hmm.
how what you do fits with how everybody else does it. So
Yeah.
that's why it's so hard to change corporate culture, because there's so many pieces. And if one of these pieces, somebody wants to do something else, the other pieces don't have an easy way to fit in. And if you try to redesign it from the top down, it's not organic, like it's
Mm-hmm.
not easy,
And the
so it
flow
doesn't the flow.
and the agreement.
So that's where it has to filter in from how the people that are there doing the work, that the culture has to change from many from within. And and it takes time. So I think that the expectations that the younger people in the workforce have going into the workforce now is going to play a huge role in changing corporate culture, because what they expect is so different than what the previous generation expected. So they're
Yes.
going to come up with their own ways of doing it.
Handling
And mhm,
and viewing it.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 I
yeah.
just want to share this next thought, and then I'm going to move on to the next saucy question. The next question is saucy. I find it very interesting that my social media following, as well as my YouTube subscribers and viewers, under age 30.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it is early in your career that you're looking for the insights to help you grow in
Yes.
your career, right?
Yeah.
So,
And we didn't get the white paper, the memo. Go ahead.
especially for women, you know, we have to chart it out. We've got to figure it out. So we're doing the research on how do we grow and how do we succeed. And there still aren't enough charted paths. There are charted paths, but if you want to go on a different path, then you have to go and try to figure that out yourself. So, that's why, your resource is so helpful for people to listen to the experiences. Because, like, for me, that was what I did too, was looking at the experiences of people, men and women,
Mhm.
doing all different kinds of things, and I would listen. I found so many mentors in my early career to just listen to. Like,
Yeah.
what did you experience when you were faced with this problem? What did you do? And it may be completely irrelevant to any scenario that I was in, but that experience was still valuable for me to learn about.
Yeah, because I think the people are looking at how do you handle a situation, not only to test you, but also to borrow to see how they can apply to themselves. Okay, so
Yeah,
yeah,
it's so important, so important.
although they'll never admit to that. Okay, so all right, so here's the next question, and I have to keep moving it along. Okay, so do you think that these women employees were exploited as a type of honeypot, or others attempted to exploit them? And again, I'm referring to the two articles. And then the next question of following up on that is, how do you think women could avoid or better handle these situations?
Yeah, I mean, like, that question of whether they were exploited, I feel like I can't give a very informed, because I don't know that situation. I wasn't there. I do think that there is a lot of retaliation that happens against women who do speak up,
Mm-hmm.
and that's because people don't like their boats rocked. People want stability. People in power, and whoever that power is, wants stability. So in this environment where it was a very uh, male dominated, sexist environment where they saw a woman as a particular role,
Mm-hmm. And
when
they seem to be
that
writing the script. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go
they're
ahead.
writing the script. They're the ones. I mean, if you're the one in charge, you get to write the script,
Mm-hmm.
and when, that, when you feel that you're losing control over that, then you need to put order back, right? Everybody wants order.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants a sense of disorder in a corporate environment. So, that, and who gets to make that order? The person in charge. And if everyone in charge looks exactly the same and thinks exactly the same, that's the environment that's going to be. So that I do think that, that's why
Mm-hmm.
diversity in leadership
Makes a
is
difference.
so important. And diversity means diversity in thought,
Mm-hmm.
diversity in background, diversity in perspective, diversity in life experience, diversity, where, it's not just limited to gender or race. It is from different life perspectives,
Mhm.
because then it's not, you can, as an organization, better handle these situations, because that negative press that these companies have received,
Although it was a blink of an
have
eye, I felt like, but go ahead.
but it's I don't think so. I think
Okay.
it does permeate, because women um talk about it,
And women
as
remember.
women remember, right? And you need women in your workforce. So at the end of the day, we like, it's human capital, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, human resources, it's human capital. And a company cannot thrive without that human capital that
And the
goes in,
talent.
the
Yeah,
talent.
yeah.
And so if you have branded yourself as, a place that half of the workforce, doesn't want to touch you with a 10-foot pole, then you've hamstringed yourself. And so that's so negative to your brand. Um, so I think that
Because it
as
shows short-sightedness.
Mhm. It shows short-sightedness, and it eventually will also lead to your organization not being able to handle, like the changes in the workforce, where if you have management and leadership only with one perspective, then they won't be able to manage a diverse population. Like, if you want diversity in the workplace, which every single company has some sort of diversity policy, um, you know, that they believe in a diverse workplace. But if your management is not diverse, then
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to successfully manage a diverse workplace. It just doesn't work. You need to have, the leadership be able to understand what that means to have diversity in thought. So I think that, again, in the next 10 years, when we have more people from the older generation retiring and more people from this younger generation coming up, we're going to see these drastic changes
And I,
in what companies expect out of themselves.
yeah, yeah, and I do think that the younger generation of women coming up, they are very aware and observant, and I think that they are choosing to voice their opinions.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So perception is a belief system. People make assumptions off of the get-go in reading the landscape. Let's say, and we mentioned this before, let's say the university atmosphere is more of a zoo than a real life concrete jungle regarding its safety glass. What would you like women to know about real life compared to the illusions we are taught, sold, or told in order to complete their legacy?
Yeah, I think we touched a little bit about this early on, and just kind of revisit that thought, where I think that, and this I think is also just more impacting American young women, because in American society, I think women have been taught in elementary school, in middle school, about this concept of, being fair. Everything has to be fair.
Or we can do it
And
all.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and there is, women can do everything that men can do, and there's is this expectation, that when you um, go out into the world, and your first exposure to the world is college. I mean, it's
For most.
still
Mhm.
this sheltered, artificial environment, but it's your first time away from home, where
Mhm.
you are on your own, and you get to see people for who they are, without the tethers of parental control over them. Right. So this is the first time people get to just run wild.
Yeah.
And as a college student, you still don't have full control of your impulses yet.
Okay.
It's And so it is people being their worst selves without having the brain fully developed to be responsible yet, and without the parental control reining them in.
So
So
the
you
rebellion.
see the rebellion,
Yeah.
the testing limits of just letting themselves be as wild as they can, because that is the time that they think is when they can do it, because after you finish college, then you have to be responsible, you
You
have a
have to be a
job,
responsible adult.
right?
Yes, yes.
So women now are exposed in this environment where you see people as their worst selves, trying and just running away with impulses, and expecting that it's still going to be this safe, sheltered kind of environment where people are on their best behavior, and then you see people on their worst behavior. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so two last questions. For a woman in a family business who has to face areas around family dynamics, what advice would you give to her regarding the loneliness that she will face? And here's the good news before I have that question to pose to Shirley. The good news right now is women in family businesses are the pioneers leading the way with the glass ceiling given succession.
Yeah. Um,
So,
and not just now, but since women were first involved in family businesses, which is a long time ago, that is where that's my exposure to business. Actually, my parents were small business owners,
okay.
and my mom was the one that managed the store. My dad was off trying to get his factories going overseas and trying to grow his legacy. My mom was the one that was managing the store to make sure that we had money to pay the bills,
Okay.
and we could um, uh, pay the mortgage and eat. And she was the one that did it. And it was so many other small businesses that I grew up with seeing that it was the woman. If it was a mom and pop business, a lot of small businesses are mom and pop businesses, where
Mhm.
it was the woman who was the one that was really managing more of the day to day business, where the men were out making the deals. The women were the ones to make sure that they understood what was the accounting, what was the actual financial situation, and growing the contacts with the relationships with other business people. So, like, I think that women in small business, they have more support than women in like these corporate environments where you still have fewer women in leadership positions. You have all of these women small business groups that are all around all the major cities
Okay.
for women to find support with themselves. And there is a lot of financial support and grants and loans for women in small businesses too, that are there to encourage. So I think that that is just really a wonderful path, opportunities. And I'm a woman in small business too, and it's been wonderfully supportive. All the people that I've been able to meet,
Okay.
other women. And I have to say that when I was in like corporate, my mentors, they were men. I
Mhm.
had to find male mentors because there just weren't enough female mentors for me to find. So like to have small business women mentors, so many, I think it's wonderful.
Okay, that's a beautiful answer. I wasn't expecting that, but that's a beautiful answer. So she doesn't necessarily have to be lonely if she can realize the network that is out there. Let me just move my hair back.
Mhm.
Okay, realize the network and the resources that are out there, that she doesn't have to be an island. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Like it is such a great time to start a small business. And so many women have taken that step for themselves, and have found, it's not easy. I don't want to say that it is an easy path, because if you are going to start something new, you have to make sure that you are able to, you have a good business model, that you know that you can
make it in the
make
marketplace.
it, and you need to have a backup to, in case it doesn't work out. But if you have done your research and you think that you can make it work, it's so rewarding for you to be able to do that. And there are so many resources to give you that support. Like the first get together social activity that I did was getting together with some of the women small business owner friends that I have, where like we have all kind of expanded during the pandemic, where we were doing more during COVID time than we were before COVID time, and we got together and just kind of celebrated our successes and gave each other some, support, encouragement, and inspiration. Yeah.
Good, good. And final question, what would you like your life's legacy to be?
That's really hard because, I don't know yet, because there's still so much more to it that I don't know. But I want to be able to do it with mindfulness. Like wherever I end up, like I don't want to write my story yet until it's at the end. But where my life goes, I want it to be done with mindfulness, with honesty, and with um, embracing the unknown. Like that is, and that's what I want my children to see that I do with my life. And it's not just with my career, but it's like life in general. Like I have a little different perspective on the work life balance thing, just because of the choices that I made. I decided that it's just life. Right? Like I only have life, and part of my life includes making sure that I earn an income so that I can afford the things that I need to afford. But I
Good.
don't consider that part as work. It's also my life. Like it's just all life for me. Sometimes I need a little bit less money. Sometimes I need a little bit more money, depending on what's happening. And I adjust, what part of my life is leisure? What part is it with my kids? What part of it is teaching? And it just kind of, either contracts or expands as needed. That's my life. And I want my children to see that, I make my life choices being honest,
Mhm.
honest to others, honest to myself, and um, not doing something because I'm scared,
Mm,
because life is just full of unknown. You don't
yes.
know until you try. I might fail miserably. Like I might like completely fall on my face. But then that's a learning moment for me. I might try it again,
Yes.
right? Try it a little differently. I might not try it at all, but I'm not going to not try because I'm afraid I'm going to fall.
Right.
Because the only way, and this is also now like the Tai Chi training is, like my experience is I get pushed around and I am either going to stay on my feet or my butt is going to land on the ground.
Yes.
And the only way I can learn how to stay on my feet is to figure out how to not have my butt land on the ground,
Yes.
which
Dancing in the moment.
requires
Yes.
many, many times of my butt landing on the ground until I figure out how I can stay on my feet. Like it's not
Yeah.
something I can theorize. I can't say, this is how I'm going to stay on my feet, because that might, most likely that's not the reality. I have to figure it out by actually getting pushed, and I can stay on my feet.
An application. Yes.
Application. So that's
Yeah.
like my whole life is through application. And yeah, so that's what I think of, like leaving my legacy.
Good. Good.
Ah,
Thank you so much, Shirley, for tackling some of these difficult subjects that I know are not always comfortable to talk about. I know we've had these conversations in private, but it's another thing to bring it to a public forum, to invite the any outside listener or viewer in. But it also gives them a chance to reflect on alternative narratives outside of just what maybe the media talks about, whether it's in the Huffington Post or
mhm,
different real estate websites. And I just also wanted to acknowledge that, you are living your legacy right now, kind of like the metaphor of the water that you brought up.
mhm.
And you've been, one foot in the corporate world, just as you've got one foot now in the world of, being an entrepreneur. And so I hope that your positive example can resonate with anyone out there that, is searching. And I think that as we've talked about, there are many individuals right now who are of Generation Z and Y that are looking for examples outside of what might just be readily available. And so I just wanted to say thank you for
Oh, thank you so
your
much. I think
input.
thank you so much for letting me share my thoughts, and it is like a slightly different perspective, I think, than what is generally told to women. And I guess I'll just end with something that I really believe strongly in is I don't think it does women justice to feed them a false sense of empowerment. Um, because I don't think that it helps them to be able to really do what needs to be done to succeed. Where, just because you believe that things should be a certain way, and you feel empowered to make that happen, doesn't mean that that's going to happen. More
Yeah.
likely than not, you're going to come up against a wall. So if you can set your own ego aside, no longer feel like you have anything to prove, right? So think about like the success that you want, is it the success of doing it that you want? Or is it the acknowledgement that you did it that you want? They're two different things. If you want the acknowledgement that you did it, that might actually get in the way of you being able to do it. Because, I can help you navigate if you want to be that water finding the cracks, and like get, to where you want to go. Um, uh, a lot of it may actually be things that you won't get recognized for, and you don't want to um, maybe put yourself so visibly out that you're doing it, because it's easier to fly under the radar until you end up there. And then all of a sudden, hey, how did that rose bloom in the desert? I don't remember it getting planted there, but hey, here it is and it's thriving. Though, be that, instead of being the one who, is the first to plant that rose in the desert.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. So thank you so much. And what's the best way if somebody wanted to reach out to you?
So, you can reach me on my website, Aiping Tai Chi.com. I'm also on social media. So we have an Instagram, Aiping Tai Chi. I'm on Twitter, The Stress Bender on Twitter. And we have a YouTube channel, Aiping Tai Chi Center. So basically, if you search Aiping TAICHI, you will find me. I live stream on Twitch as well. So I do a free live stream on Twitch where I teach techniques to people around the world, which has been a lot of fun. It's reaching a younger audience than who would normally come into my school for live lessons. So that's been a lot of fun to teach concepts and philosophy and techniques.
Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Angelina.
And all of those will be in the show notes also.
All right. It's been
Okay,
so much fun having this conversation.
okay, okay.
Take care.